One question, how is the situation, we spoke about young people there, how is the situation of women in the northern province of Mozambique? Did you have an understanding of how women are surviving with this?
I think generally speaking, I think women and children obviously are amongst the worst affected groups of people. And with the migration, as they try to escape the region, obviously some of them are left with no places to put up and no source of livelihood. So it is really a difficult thing for them. And I'm made to believe that some of them have resorted to even being informants. So you can see that it's not only young people that have a role in this whole thing. So even women, when they are left with no choice, sometimes they become informants. And I think that's where the opportunity is. If women and young people are being easily robbed into the violence and into the insurgency, it means they are the very same people that we need to target when we look for solutions to address this, because they are the key players in whatever is going on.
Thank you so much. For those who joined us maybe in the middle of the conversation, we are talking about the issue in the northern of Mozambique, and we just discussed the issue of the root causes, but also who are the insurgency. So thank you so much for joining us, and we have a time for questions in the next section of this conversation. But in meantime, if you have a question to ask, please type in the chat room, and you can indicate who do you want to ask the question. Mr. David, I will bring you in. We've just heard what is happening, and you both agree, I mean, you and Hanifa, that people in that region have been neglected, which contributed also to how this issue has unfolded. Because if people were taken care, they wouldn't kind of welcome this insurgency, but because they maybe saw in one way maybe to ache out of their lives, and they joined. Last week in this same platform, we had a conversation on the issue of Eswatini. And one young person, and I think I saw his name here, Maxwell, shared with the audience how young people want really to be part of the governance. Young people in Eswatini, they want to participate. They want also to have employment. But the way their kingdom has reacted was just to kill them and to shut them down. What do you see, if we go back to Mozambique, what do you see this solution which SADC is trying to take? Yes, sending troops, and we just noticed that the Rwandan have sent 700 soldiers and 300 police, which also came as a surprise, because you can imagine a body like SADC to be surprised by this intervention. They looked like they did not know. And then it's only these past few days where South Africa, Botswana, they are sending their troops. What do you read in this response? Are you happy with this military response, or is there something you would want to suggest which maybe can go with this? What is your reading of the situation in responding?
Look here, firstly, Mozambique government, and especially their armed forces needed support to create stability and security in the area. Unfortunately, Mozambique's defense force is poorly equipped, low morale, and very little expertise to be able to deal with this issue. So the additional forces, it will be complicated, but will definitely assist Mozambique in creating some stability. And stability in the area will be required for some economic development to take place, which will have to follow that very closely to the stability. I think the whole insurgent attacks are definitely going to change with more military personnel on the ground and wider spread. I think you're going to go to a lot more guerrilla warfare now, where the insurgents will not try and take cities, occupy and keep them. It'll be impossible with the numbers of military personnel there. So you'll find they will be more hit military, civilian state targets and stay within the communities. So it's going to become a very difficult fight going forward than what the last few months were, whereby you had large numbers of insurgencies, 50, 60, 70 of them attacking a town. I don't think this will take place. But with the cover of some security and stabilizing the area, economic development needs to take place. But I think from the youth perspective, we've got these internally displaced people in these camps. And I think these camps should be focused on it first. Firstly from the basic requirements, but then from things like education, sporting activities. I think we need to give the youth some sort of identity to identify themselves with, in the sense of either a sporting activity, some education, and skills transfer. I think in these camps, some basic skill transfer can take place, even enhancing agricultural skills, because this is what most of the community has been involved in. And I think youth can also play a very important role in the sense of creating transparency in this time with the foreign forces. Social media has given the youth a great opportunity to share information, and this will also keep human rights related activities exposed. Just from the first set level of stability, this is what I think youth can do and take place.
Thank you so much, and for those suggestions and the emphasis on what young can do. And you are very right that with the social media we can do much. Already I have been reading some news coming from the condemning already some of the forces who are abusing local people there. So maybe for the person taking a recommendation, that could be one of the recommendation that young people, we need to stand up and promote transparency in whatever is happening. But David, you mentioned transparency, openness, and even the solution. There are some. I'm not bringing you back, but I'm avoiding that this question could come at the end. People have been really saying that the government of Mozambique is not being transparent in how it wants to deal with the issue, in how much like these forces are going to cost. And I also mentioned how it caught by surprise SADC to hear that troops are already there when the conversation with SADC was still ongoing. do you think the government is being genuine? Because if at the start there's some not unclear issues, how are we going to be sure that when we come to transformation, socio-economic, they are going to be genuine?
Look here, I think Mozambique government knows that they don't have the capacity to solve it and didn't want to really admit it in all forums. And this is also why they've limited press coverage in the area. It's basically because they really can't resolve this thing alone. They don't really have the funds to spend on military activities, even to a lesser extent on social development in that area. The entry of Rwanda was a surprise, but Rwanda's proven over and over in various cases in the DRC and in CAR, they can deploy very quickly. They're a very professional force, and naturally, Rwanda wants to play in this space as well. I think it's also exerting its influence in Southern Africa as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me bring back Hanifa on the solutions. What do you think should be done, really, which tackles the root causes and not what we see only?
Thank you, Joseph. I think over and above what David has said, what SADC needs to do is to have a trans-governmental approach in terms of policy making. So it's good that they've started to consider this a problem for the region and not only for Mozambique, because as has been alluded to earlier, this has been brewing for years. So it only started coming to light around 2017. But there are reports that even as early as 2014, there had already been some attacks and the government was trying to shut it down and they were turning a blind eye. So because it has potential to spill into other regions, there is need for the region to come together when policymakers are coming up with solutions and have a trans-governmental approach in terms of how to deal with the solution. And I think because most of the issues primarily stem from poor governance, this is something that we've seen across the region. Young people have expressed dissatisfaction with the way that they're governed. A lot of governments have shifted their focus from serving their people, but prolonging their time in office and personally enriching themselves. So without that shift really for the entire region, where governments become citizen-centered, I see that this will continue to happen. It may not happen in the same vein of this kind of religious insurgency or whatever, but we've seen even in South Africa recently with the looting and the violence, that when people are dissatisfied about how they're governed or dissatisfied economically or anything, there is always room for violence to erupt, and it's usually young people who are the drivers. So I think governments need to put young people at the center, create more opportunities for young people, and incorporate those issues into their policymaking efforts. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. And there's a question for you as GI asking you, who seems to be the recipient of the information from the female informant and how are they compensated? Not sure if, do you get it? What is the question about? Who seems to be the recipient of the information from female informant and how are they compensated?
Mm. I'm particularly interested in the fact that the person asking the question decided to specifically point out to female informants. Well, my reference to women becoming informants wasn't necessarily that there's like a category where they're like grouped and there's like female informants, young informants, anybody could be an informant, but I was just making it as an observation that because of being left with no choice, they sometimes resort to being informants. But to go back to the question of who are the recipients. So I think depending on the circumstance, so if it's the soldiers and you're really put in a corner, you're bound to become an informant in their favor. But if it's the insurgents as well, you are bound to become an informant. So the recipients could be either the soldiers or the insurgents, really. But sorry. Okay.
Yes, go on.
No, but I was just saying, going back to my comment earlier on, in this instance, I meant them being informants to the insurgents, because obviously we were talking about the perpetrators of violence and why the violence was growing. So it's a problem when they become informants for the insurgents, because that means it's more people being turned against the government and it's more people joining the movement.
Thank you. And one comment from a participant, Edward Chileka Banda from Malawi, says, I'm saddened with development in Mozambique, but I don't think the military approach will work. The insurgency is recruiting local young people. I propose that government need to dialogue with the local people, get into some agreement so that the insurgent fail to recruit from them. What do you think of this suggestion, Ms. Hanifa?
I think this is just reiterating what I said earlier on as well, that I think a purely military approach will not provide answers. In any case, we might even see ourselves with a bigger problem. Because I think when you fight fire with fire, it's only bound to get bigger. But when we go to the root causes, like what we're trying to do now, to sort of analyze why this could be happening, and we target those root causes, I think that's where we may have a chance in addressing the issues. It's not something that will happen by the click of the finger. It will take time, it will take a lot of work, but definitely not just going the military route.
Thank you so much. There are many comments about military. Let me also bring in David and also a negotiation thing. GI says history does tell us that military interventions do not always offer lasting solutions. Does the government of Mozambique make effort to negotiate with the insurgents? This for you, David, but to add to this, you did mention the intervention of Rwanda and DRC. Maybe in CR it might have worked, but I don't think in DRC it worked, because we have witnessed for almost 20 years wars in the east of DRC. So GI says military intervention does not always offer lasting solutions. David, what do you think? Do you think the government should negotiate?
I agree 100%. Military solution will not work. All it'll do is create some stability for civilians in the short term, especially if this goes into ongoing guerrilla type style warfare. It's never going to be resolved on a military issue. Yes, I think in the sense of the problem is two things. The Mozambique government hasn't been keen to negotiate because it gives them a view that they're in a weak situation. So I think in the sense of if they could stabilize the area, puts them in a stronger position to negotiate. The second part is, who do they negotiate with? As these insurgents haven't identified a leader or a core group of leaders to negotiate with. So negotiation with insurgents at this point is very difficult. Who are they? Who they represent? Who can you negotiate with? But in the second level is in the sense of government and SADC getting involved with local community, speaking to them, giving them more opportunities, developing the areas, actually getting all those internally displaced people back into their villages is going to be difficult, because how are you going to guarantee them the security? So it's it's a multi-pronged approach that's going to have to take place. But I don't foresee that the military leave that area within the next 12 months, very minimum, to maintain some sort of security for civilians, and government to deploy services back in that area.
Thank you, David. I think you...
Sorry,
Hanifa, yes, go on, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to also add on to what David said in as far as negotiating with the insurgents is concerned, that I also find that quite problematic, because I would compare it to trying to deal with a toddler. So every time they throw a tantrum, you're just gonna give them whatever they ask for. So even as he has already said, we don't know who they are, but I think even if we knew who they really are, trying to negotiate with them directly, I don't think would really work, because that would sort of give motive for other opportunists, in future to do the same, with the hope that they can always get what they want. But if we address the underlying issues, even if they try to recruit people from local communities, even if they try to grow their movement, people won't have that incentive. They won't have that motivation to join, because they're quite satisfied. So I think our answers should lie in good governance and in providing services that people should have.
Thank you so much. So you agree with Chongo Mukupa, who is also in this webinar, says the SADC intervention should have come with a cocktail of measures, including persuading the Mozambique government to negotiate with the rebels. So this one is saying negotiating, but also while planning a program of development for the region. At the moment, if local people are not engaged, it will all look like SADC, including Rwanda's intervention, are not for their well-being, but for protection of Western investment. Any comment on this? I think you are muted. Hi, Hanifa, I think you are muted.
Sorry, I was saying I didn't quite catch everything, but if you told me who the comment is from, I could try look it up in the search. I mean, in the chat section.
From Placid, from Chongo Mukupa.
Oh, the one that talks about the SADC intervention should have come with, okay. But for protection of Western investment, okay. That's interesting. I wouldn't really put it that way, protection of Western investment as such, but perhaps to guard their self-interest, because if you were to look at it, I think President Philippe Nyusi was quite reluctant to welcome troops from foreign nations abroad for quite some time, for reasons best known to him. Even in terms of foreign aid, he was quite reluctant. So I would not think it's to protect foreign investment, but Perhaps because a point I forgot to mention earlier was this prevalent culture of corruption in terms of the Mozambican government and how that also feeds this the growth of this violence. So because you find that the soldiers in some instances, that those that were disgruntled were reporting that in some instances, their superiors were actually releasing some of the insurgents just so, like for a large sum of money. So you can see that there is a problem there because even members of the Mozambican army who are meant to be fighting these insurgents, if they are buying into the wishes of the insurgents just for a couple of dollars, it means there's a huge problem of corruption and wanting to serve self-interest. So I would really allude it to that than to the protection of Western investment.
Thank you so much. There's also a question. You tell me who's comfortable to answer it. It says, it's also from Chongo. My concern is who finances Islamists in Africa, and how come even big powers, with all their sophistication, have not been able to end Islamic attacks in areas like the Sahel?
Maybe just one comment on the Mozambique situation. Historically, there's been a huge illicit trade taking place through the northern part of Mozambique. We have huge heroin trade, ruby trade, endangered species trade, and there are always some synergies and some assistance that these players give each other. One might secure the logistic routes for the one party, and the other party would possibly assist with transporting goods for the other party. So from a funding perspective, in the sense of that, sometimes these different groups, criminal groups and insurgents, could be supporting each other directly and indirectly. Some fundamental aligned countries in the Middle East have known to support some of these groupings when it comes to money and safe havens. So yeah, it's difficult to say specifically who's doing it in the Mozambique arena.
Good, thank you, David. And there was maybe one question. There's someone who mentioned about protecting Western interest, and there were a conversation that maybe, and I think both of you have alluded to this, that there's oil there, but people don't benefit from this, and that there is, I think, a French, there's a French company that if the insurgency carries on, which will lose a lot, so that maybe government is not really willing to listen to local people. Instead, they are really, they can sacrifice everything just for the interest of business and foreign business. Is it also your understanding on this issue?
I think there's, maybe if I can make some comments. From an economic perspective and growth in Mozambique, I think the investment in the gas plants are fundamental to the growth of Mozambique going forward. How that money gets used, again, is the big question, and how the profits get invested back into the community. is the big question. I think the big issue with the current phase of this development, most of the work is highly skilled. So local population has very little opportunity getting jobs in this current phase of development. Yes, there's a lot of minor labor jobs that are available that they could take up, but not vast employment opportunities at this point. Also, local population doesn't have the supply chains to offer services to these projects. Also, let's be quite honest, it is easier protecting a small project area than vast area like Cabo Delgado and all the population that's in that area. I'm not saying that that's why the forces are there is to protect the investment, but partly that investment needs to be protected. But you cannot just cut off the rest of the province and protect the investment. The old province and the porous boundary, especially between Tanzania and Mozambique, needs to be reinforced and protected.
Thank you so much. We will be now crossing over to participants who have comments and questions. London, how are we doing on time?
Doing good. We have about an hour left, so plenty of time to answer questions and whatnot.
Good. Colleagues, please help me to really thank my colleague London, who have supported the team, the Africa Unite team, to organize this webinar. London is doing his internship at Africa Unite, and you could imagine how we were managed to put this together with the time limit, and but also our difference in time. I like today had to wake up at 4 on their side, so please help me to thank him. How do we do it online? Maybe if we can clap for him, I will appreciate. But London and the team, well done, really. Josephine Kimanu Maua, I think, Josephine, you are from DRC, says the solution should be holistic, involving political, military, socio-economic, diplomatic, etc., and engage different parts like young people, women, entrepreneurs, politicians, from local to regional levels, and confront the two approaches, top-down and bottom-up intervention. This is a very complex intervention. You are right, Josephine. This is a very complex intervention. But something needs to be done. GI says, thank you, David. Then there was a question asked by David, by Placid to David. Placid says, according to the UN mapping report, Rwandan troops are responsible for crimes against humanity and possibly a genocide in DRC. What measures should be taken to avoid such atrocities? There is a huge Rwandan community that flew Rwanda regime, actually survivors from those crimes committed in DRC. Who are in Mozambique, I think that's what the person meant. So what do you think? I think they're asking you, David, what do you think, what should be done to avoid such thing to happen again?
Yeah, look here, I mean, that is quite a sensitive point. We know that there's quite a few Rwandan dissidents in Nampula area. And I think a month or two ago, there was one arrested by Mozambique, and I'm not sure if he was actually sent back to Rwanda. And so, yes, that is something that needs to be watched. Civil society, local population, media needs to keep their eyes and ears open and report on this issue and lobby government, the Mozambique government, to keep a tight control and watch over this. There is possibilities, but again, in the end of the day, it's going to be up to NGOs and organizations to highlight the possibility of these violations that could take place.
Thank you so much for this, and I'm happy that we have civil society in this webinar. So this is one of the recommendations to them, and let's colleagues keep questions and comments coming. Let's give maybe 20 minutes for question and answer, and then we can close this webinar. I will give to one or two people who would want to comment. Let me know. I can give you the floor. I'm aware that one of our panelists, Hanifa, will be leaving a little early for another engagement. But thank you so much for, if you have one or two questions for her, let me know before we let her go. Then there's a comment saying the violation of human rights tend to be the issue in situations such as what we see in Mozambique. This violation can be perpetrated by both the armed groups and intervening forces. I'm not sure if the panelists will know the level of training and competency of the intervening forces in terms of human rights law and humanitarian law, as this is remain a concern. I think, David, you just alluded to that, but maybe one of the recommendations from this could be that forces dispatched today should make sure that they are trained in human rights laws and humanitarian laws. Do you have an idea if it's done before they are sent to missions like this?
I'm sure, just if I make a comment, I'm sure they all get, there is a component in their training that takes this in place and accounts for the behavior of soldiers on foreign territory. I mean, I don't have personal experience from the Rwandan troops and that. I know South African forces do have training in that aspect. But again, it's enforcing it and implementing it. South Africa's had issues with our soldiers in DRC as well. So it is very difficult and it needs close monitoring on the ground where activities. I think Mozambique's going to be a challenge with the current operation because I foresee that SADC will be placed in certain areas, the Rwandan and the Mozambican forces in other areas, and command and control is going to be very difficult to implement and action, and they'll not be fighting as one force but separate units in different areas. So yeah, again, I can just stress that civil society is going to have to play a huge role in monitoring the situation.
Thank you so much. Actually, there's also another question which came to my mind. We've noticed I'm not sure if it's a disagreement between SADC and the government of Mozambique. Don't you think maybe do you think the little conflict, if I can call it, is it resolved that these troops are not going to kind of hate each other once they are on the field, and which can also bring some security issues? Because we can imagine if a SADC said, oh, Rwanda is supposed not to come before us, you did not even inform us, and the guy said, no, we came at the approval of Mozambicano government. Do you think there's no possible conflict there?
Again, I could comment if you'd like. I think the potential is there, especially from the command and control structure. It's a very difficult terrain to do battles in. It's extremely bushy, but all the forces are unaware of or unfamiliar with the terrain. It's going to depend on the intelligence capacity of these different groupings and the sharing of intelligence, and how quickly this gets communicated to the various structures. It's going to be a complex situation, but those definitely can take place. While the PMCs were assisting Mozambique Defence Force, some of them actually did take friendly fire as well. So friendly fire is always a possibility.
Good. Thank you so much for this. Let me, before one of our panelists leaves, if you could take 1 or 2 minutes just for your closing remark before you go, Hanifa, and then we can go to the conclusion of this webinar with recommendations. I guess, David, you still fine with time, right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you so much, Joseph and the team at Africa Unite for this opportunity. As Joseph pointed out earlier, this was very last minute, and I accepted, but having had made prior arrangements to be somewhere else. So I'm sorry I have to leave before the webinar is over, but this has certainly been an eye-opening experience for me as well, because I did mention to Joseph that the only reason why I'm particularly interested in this topic is I will be taking up a fellowship with the European University Institute in Italy in the next month or so, where my focus will particularly be on Mozambique and what's happening in the region and the role of women and youth in bringing about peace. So I was also looking to learn. So some of the questions thrown at me and at David were certainly eye-opening and are things that I will be looking into even as I leave. I think just to conclude, I would just like to reiterate on the importance of looking at this as something that needs a policy response. And I think we are very good at coming up with policies in the region, but implementing them has been a huge challenge. So not only a question of coming up with great policy responses, but ensuring that whatever policy response is developed is implemented well, and making sure that the role of women and youth is also taken into account. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the very best.
Good, thank you, really, we do appreciate. And once again, could you remind us the Institute to represent what kind of work you do, and if you could also share your social media handles in the chat group so that we can keep on engaging with you.
Absolutely, I'll do that just before I leave. Thank you.
Good. Colleagues, we thank you so much. We're going now to move to recommendations, and I see some hands here. Before I hand over to Edward and Frody, When you take up, please remember to switch on your mic and introduce yourself and your organization. But also, as you comment, let's also move to the recommendations. What shall we do? There was also a question of, there was a comment on SADC upcoming meeting. Maybe we could use some of this, one of these platform, which I'm not sure yet if it's going to be a virtual or if it's going to be a face-to-face. Maybe Edward, I know you are based in Malawi. Let us know if you know what is happening at the SADC summit, and if your organization could also be maybe willing to work with us on advocating and putting some of these issues to the head of state in Lilongwe. Over to you, Edward. Then after you, Flori.
Thank you, Jos. I think, and thank you for this quite a great initiative and platform to really talk about the situation in Mozambique, which has given us an idea that the youth negligence could also be a factor that could be fueling insecurity. So you have already read my comment because I was raising a hand to explore possibilities of how, as citizens and as young people, we could also send a message to our leaders that are meeting in Lilongwe in August. And I think in Malawi, not only in Malawi, but I think with the civil society fraternity in SADC under the SAPSIN is arranging to also engage SADC heads of states on various issues, including governance, security, and others. But what we are participating as an organization, but what has not been coming out clearly is on the youth message. And I think the meeting is not virtual, it is actually physical. The heads of states will meet. So probably because of the COVID-19, we plan to find ways on how we can engage and communicate with the heads of states. So maybe if we could decide to utilize this platform, we can discuss later how best we can pitch the youth theme and in connection with this insecurity situation in SADC region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edward, for offering to work with us. For sure, we'll contact you so that we can take up some of these things. Yes, youth issues, the issues of unemployment, but also the issue of refugees in SADC. We can really work together on this. Thank you so much once again. Flori, before I come to you, thanks also, Edward, for sharing with us. I wasn't sure if the meeting is going to be physical, so this is a good opportunity for us. Actually, there was a joke. I'm not sure if a participant here you saw it, that your president flew to UK to attend the webinar because your internet is not reliable.
It's just a joke. It's just a joke. Actually, I think there was an arrangement that they meet physically in the UK.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe that's why the meeting is going to be physical, but I know it's a joke. I saw the whole list of event he's attending. That's why sometimes young people, before we comment, we should really check. There was a whole trending on the internet that the president is going to UK just to attend the webinar meeting because there's no internet in there. So that was just a joke, but really we are willing to work with you. Flori, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Flori Chimbalanga from the Congo. I work for SECO Consulting. I've been just listening carefully to Hanifa and Mr. David. This is a very important topic that we, if it's possible, can discuss it in most of times. I asked a question is on the, I sent it on the panel. My question was, I believe that Rwanda is not sharing borders with Mozambique, but how can Rwanda send the troops to Mozambique without the SADC getting involved? Because when you look at Mozambique, you know, we're sharing border with South Africa and other countries around, but not Rwanda. That is the first question, why Rwanda can come forward. And another thing also is, I like what Hanifa just mentioned about we are very good in putting laws in place, but implementation is the issues. You know, I follow what's happening in Mozambique very carefully. I remember last time, I think probably last year, when people were causing chaos that side, they said, well, if South Africa can get involved in the war happening in Mozambique, it's going to be a problem for South Africa. They kind of treat the way saying South Africa is not allowed to get involved in the affairs of Mozambique. I think this is a big problem that we're having in Africa because there are no awareness. I think if you can just raise these issues like all the young or youth people in Africa, they have to take care of their countries. They have to make sure that now that they can show in all their countries. Nobody from outside can bring peace if yourself, your people, your population are not willing to bring peace into themselves. I think this is the message that we can, especially for Hanifa and David and all of you guys who are involved in this panel, we can bring awareness what's happening in those countries. That is a very important contribution I wanted to say. There's more we can talk about, but this is the thing I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brody, and I hope you have also left your your contact in the chat room so that we can keep in touch. Thank you for this. Let's hear from David. What do you think?
Well, I think on the first question, there was a simple bilateral agreement signed between Mozambique and Rwanda for those troops to come. So it was done outside of the SADC mandate, as Rwanda is not part of SADC. So that was a bilateral agreement, which any country can do.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see, anyone in the room who would want to comment before we go to the recommendations? David, let me ask you, are you familiar with the issue of refugees? What is their situation in that area? And those who crossed over to Tanzania, did they were sent back? Do you have an idea? Or
sorry, I don't have up-to-date information what actually happened to those citizens. No, I don't.
Okay. Maybe one of the way forward for this, as the Southern Africa Migration Network, we need to really find out how they were treated, but also how are they being treated now. There was we had someone who was gonna share with us information, who was working with refugees in Mozambique, but at the last minute his partner got diagnosed with this COVID, and it was not easy for him to attend because he needed to make arrangement for the family. So that's why maybe that is lacking. But we will as a way forward. Then there is a comment from Chongo mentioned that the President Nyusi was reluctant to admit foreign troops to counter the insurgency. But after Emmanuel Macron, I think it's president of France, met with President Kagame and President Nyusi, Rwanda troops arrived first before even SADC troops deployed. How can we rule out external French and investors' total influence in the way the issue is being handled? Chongo, thanks for the comment, but still now, yeah, we have right to suspect, but I think there haven't been any sort of confirmation. Do you have a comment on this, Mr. David?
Yeah, it's interesting. Rwandan forces were based in Fungi as their base. Yes, and we know the relationship, historical relationship between Rwanda and France. So yeah, I mean, there's certain deductions or certain assumptions that you can make, but as I said, there's no categoric answers on what role was played to support that deployment.
Thank you for the comment. If there's no more question or comment, let me ask my colleague London to come up with to share with us what are the main recommendations which are coming from this conversation, and just reminding all of you, please check on the chat room. There are comments, there are also contact for participants so that we can keep engaging each other. I'm sure we cannot get all the answers in this conversation, but this is at least a start. It's a start of a conversation. Last week we had a conversation on the Kingdom of Eswatini, and some of the solutions are coming from that conversation. There was an organization already which has accepted to work with activists in Eswatini, to link them with activists outside of the Kingdom of Eswatini, to share but also to support them. Let me ask before London comes in, Lunga, I noticed you might really, this is your area of defense and security matters. What, if you're comfortable to share maybe in 1 or 2 minutes? So this, if you can come in, Lunga, what do you suggest as a way forward? If Ilunga is there. Maxwell, before we go to the recommendation, taking into account what is happening in your country and Mozambique, are you worried that this can bring more young people to be angry with their government, or what is the way, what could you suggest so that in SADC we can avoid these things of insurgency? Maxwell, if you could share with us. Okay, Maxwell, are you there? Okay, if you I'm not sure if you heard me. So let's go to the recommendations. London, what recommendations coming from this conversation? Over to you.
Hello. Hi. So there's a few things that I took away from this meeting, especially from the panelists, and it really all comes down to the root causes of what's going on. So military reinforcements might help, but at the same time, as the panelists discussed, this is a guerrilla warfare, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint which groups to target. And at the same time, we need to figure out the way, like why the youth, especially, and women and children are participating in these activities. So definitely lobbying the government of Mozambique and other surrounding countries to better education and working opportunities will help at least a little bit fix this problem. I think that it's going to take a while for this whole conflict to be addressed, but definitely the root causes of what's going on and figuring out ways to educate people and train them in activities to where they don't have to resort to these tactics. So that's definitely something I took away from this meeting, and I learned a lot from this panel. So I thank the panelists for coming to this meeting, and it was nice to meet you guys. Thanks.
Hi, Joseph.
Yes, thank you, London, for the recommendations. Is it Lunga?
Yes, it is.
Good. I did call you, Ayano, to ask if you have one or two recommendation or comment, since you are in this area of defense and security matters. You heard from London, and do you have a comment on the recommendation, but also on the whole discussion?
Thanks for the opportunity, Joseph. Firstly, on the issue of Kigali sending troops to Mozambique, we understand clearly that Mozambique is a sovereign state, and therefore it is capable of entering into bilateral agreements with any country. That is not in question for sure, but the Kigali's eagerness to send troops to Mozambique, it raises a concern about the relations between SADC state, member states. So how is it that SADC countries were not in a position to assist even before Kigali would make a decision to send their troops? So that is a concern in terms of the relations between countries within SADC. But the recommendation that I pick up from the discussion is that governments would need to do their best to take care of their citizens than to rely on exerting force, as it seems to be what is happening now in Mozambique. Thank you.
Wow, that is a very good comment actually to end with. Government needs to take care of their citizen instead of relying on military intervention. That is really not only to the government of Mozambique, but also on our governments, African government, because we have had many issues happening in Eswatini, in very recently, actually 2 weeks here in South Africa, where people took to the street and burned malls. All of this, it's coming from people are really disgruntled, people are angry. We have seen issues in DRC, in the East Africa. It's time that African government really takes serious their citizen. Let's close this for today. Mr. David, I will ask you.
Joseph?
Yes,
Joseph,
yes.
sorry, my hand was up.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Light, so sorry. I will give you 1 minute. Then after you, we go to our panelist, Mr. David, with his closing remark.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, this came as multiple failures, right? As we've gathered from this entire webinar now, it's been a failure from intelligence agencies from all the neighboring countries, including Mozambique itself, to actually report and act on this insurgency. But it's also been all this political and bureaucratic red tape. I can briefly answer why it took South Africa this. So I can't speak for other countries, but I can speak about what's been happening here. In order for the South African Defence Force to be deployed anywhere, it needs to go through Parliament first. So this is a debate process. Papers need to be filed, gazetted, and so forth. So there were so many bureaucratic processes involved in this that it slowed down actual response to this entire region, right? But and this could be why Rwanda got to act first before any other SADC country. You know, secondly, I think as a recommendation, it is prudent that the citizens of these countries actually become more involved in lobbying with their national governments. You know, I don't think we realize that citizens actually have a lot more power and influence than we realize, and that we could actually lobby with the state to become more involved, to actually streamline our bureaucratic processes, to get more involved. And this is what South Africans should have done. You know, we should have been putting pressure on our state to act, because if anything happens in Mozambique, it directly affects all the neighboring countries, particularly South Africa, since it is a migration zone. And so this is something that we should do going forward as organizations, as private citizens, to continue lobbying, attend these meetings, these NCOP meetings, attend parliamentary inquiries, you know, have your voice heard. Even putting pressure on social media helps. So I think this is possibly a recommendation that we could use going forward in another crisis in the region like this again. Then hopefully we can avoid another KZN or another Cabo Delgado or Eswatini crisis.
Thank you, thank you. Nikela, did you want to say something? Okay, if not any other person want to speak, let me hand over to our speaker, our panelist, Mr. David. And once again, really thank you so much for sharing your views, your perspective. Very rich, and we as a participant here, we have gained a lot. We're going to really work on a way forward. And I like Life's comment that as young people need to stand up. We cannot any longer keep quiet. So thank you so much for accepting to come and share with us views and on what's happening. If you have any closing remark, over to you.
Yeah, just from our side, worked in Mozambique for the last 15 years. I've got an office there. Awesome country, fantastic people. Very sad that this has occurred in Mozambique. Mozambique needs all the help that it can get through this phase on all different levels. Many of us are critical of Mozambique government. I think they also need support on all levels. And I think youth has a vast role to play in all our countries in Africa. It's about basically making sure that their future is protected and that investment is taking place to support development of people. Human resources are our biggest asset in Africa, and we need to invest more in human resources. But thanks again for the opportunity. It was nice having a chat.
Good. Thank you so much for that closing remark. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for your wonderful participation. And as closing, please, let's keep in touch. Lyde, do you mind typing in the chat room Africa Unite contact address, our Twitter handle, our Facebook page so that you can also keep on engaging each other. Really thank you for your time. So as a closing, let's really hope that government in Africa, and specifically Mozambique, as it's the topic for today, is going to work on getting listening to young people, to local people, to poor people, because there's something I keep on always thinking. When if you ask the cost of this military intervention, you will find is very high than investment that should have done in the area of Cabo Delgado. But once it has escalated, we have now found money. But when it's the right time, why can't we invest before people get angry and start destroying? So let's hope that the government of Mozambique, working with foreign investors, are going to really take into account local people. If there is oil, let the oil also benefit the local people. Really, but also let's remember refugees who and the displaced people as who came as a result of this war. Let's advocate for their well-being. Let's advocate for women in the region, but also most importantly, let's empower people in that area, but also in the other rural area. Let's empower them with skills so that they can work, so that they can start their own jobs. So thank you so much. We will be sharing with you what will be the next topic, but for now, let's close here. Thank you so much for all your participation. Thank you for colleagues who have supported us in organizing this. And thank you to our panelists. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you. Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.